All right, let's dig into Chapter 8. We got a lot of work to do and not a lot of time to complete it. And our first action here is going to be to generate a controller for the user. So let's go ahead and grab this code and execute it. Of course, what you should do is make a copy of your work from the previous week. And frankly, I know I was making some copies earlier, but I'm not sure I copied the right stuff. So I am going to just double check that, I guess. Once I can sort my folders out. So this should be a habit you get into. Now, we haven't really had a chance here in class to really talk about how to properly use GitHub, and I could probably spend a whole night talking about it, but really what GitHub offers you is the capability of doing all the versioning that we're doing kind of automatically, and then storing your files in a spot where everybody can get to them. Except I didn't mark that one. Alright, and then I'm going to just keep working in my regular blog folder here. So I'm going to change to cd blog. And then the first command that we're going to have is Rails generate controller users. It's an uppercase U. Please be mindful of that. Alright, and with any luck you didn't have any problems with that. The next task that we have is to open up this file here in app controllers users controller. And currently the file is empty. And one thing I was talking about here in class with the students is that in order to save time, I actually jumped into the core shell, if I can find it here. And in our core shell, on the resources page, there should be, okay, right here. If you go to this website, this is where they have a listing of the errata and the source code. Now, what you should know is that you could grab this source code and it has all the chapters are already complete in the source code. And I know some of you will go, great, my homework's all done. But then some of you discover that even if you copy and paste from here, there's stuff that doesn't work. So I'm okay with you doing exactly what I'm about to do, which is to save yourself some typing and just copy and paste from the source. So if you download that and unzip it, it will create a folder on your machine that creates a separate folder for each chapter. And what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be going into Chapter 8 and then pulling files from here, opening them, and just copy and pasting the code, just to save the time in typing so we can get it done tonight. All right, so I'm going to be pulling that off to my second screen. So if you're wondering where the code's coming from, it'll be from that other screen. And I'll try to verbalize it as I'm doing it. So right now I'm going to open up the file that they're indicating in the book, and that file is app controllers users controllers, and I'm going to open that up in the source from the book. And so I don't confuse the stuff I'm working on, I'm actually going to open that up in a different editor. So I'm using my Visual Studio Code here to do that. And what we're going to do is we're going to just grab all the code that's between the opening and closing declaration, and then we're going to paste it into Notepad++ here in the fresh version of the file. And then the thing we're going to do is we're also just very quickly going to do a little bit of a comparison to make sure that the stuff that we're looking at is matching up with what's in the book, so we're not like creating two different things. I think you guys are already discovering that some of this stuff can be a little bit finicky. So we're looking at the code, we're comparing it, and just making sure it's all the same. Now, the one thing that I'm seeing that's different right off the bat is here we're doing before action set user. We're not doing the authenticate yet. What I'm going to do is I'm going to comment that out. Now here's the question. How do I comment out code in Ruby? What character do I use? Yeah, // sort of, right? What about a pound sign? Pound sign, yeah, a hashtag will comment it out. So knowing that we'll probably be adding this later. So I'm just going to do a little side-by-side comparison and just make sure that all the stuff here is matching up. So far it seems good, except for that line at the top. All right, and then I see another difference down here where this line also isn't present, and what they have instead inside here is just params. So we're going to match what the book is doing. So let's go ahead and save that in its current state, and let's move on. All right, our next task is to take a look at these two template files. So these are both in the views folders under users, so we're going to manipulate new and edit. So since you're going into the folder, you can open those up at the same time. So that is app, views, users. And you can see I don't even have these files. So what do you think I should do? Create them maybe? All right, so you can just do that directly from Notepad++ or whatever your editor is. I'm going to make a new file, and we are going to call it, so do a save as. Make sure you're in the right folder, blog app, views, users, and then we're going to do new.html.erb, and in that file, this isn't a lot of code, so we can just copy it directly from here. And I can see my mouse is being a little finicky here about doing a copy paste. PDFs can be weird that way. So this is the new file. Save it. Now let's create another new file. Once again, save as. And this other one is going to be called edit. So and then we're going to copy this code. Now remember, these Ruby delimited basically HTML tags. Whenever we have that little equal sign, what does that mean? That we're pushing output to the browser as opposed to just executing code. So these are going to do exactly what they say. So one of these is going to render the form that we need to do the the CRUD operations. And then this other one is going to create a link to, so in other words, a link that takes us back to wherever we were before. That's what it's going to do. All right, next thing we're going to do is we're going to go take a look at this file, and or not take a look at it, but create it. And you can just copy the file name right from here. And remember, if you're too lazy to download the source, which I'm not going to judge, you can always use the GitHub links that exist here to get your code as well. So underscore form HTML ERB. Make sure you spelled it right. And it looks like this code I can just grab right from here without too much difficulty. Minus that line. I don't have any of the indenting. Yeah, you know, Hayden, I think that's a marvelous idea. So Hayden's pointing out to me that if we do grab it directly from GitHub, it does have everything indented already for you. The other thing that's nice about it too is sometimes there's versions of the file, so you see that there's been 3 revisions, so apparently people have found mistakes. But I'll tell you, in some ways I'm a little cautious sometimes when I do that, because maybe those revisions are based upon fixing errors for a different version and sometimes generate other errors in and of themselves. So I am going to still take a look at this real carefully and do a side-by-side comparison here to see if we're kind of on the same page. And that all looks good to me, so I'm going to save it. And then we're going to move on to our routes file. All right, so the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to look at our routes file. And it looks like we only have one little change here, so I don't think we need to go to GitHub to do it. So I'm going to jump to the root of the application, and we're going to go to config, and we're finding our routes Ruby file. And we should already have the first 2 lines, and then we're just adding that third. Make sure you save it. And then at this point it says that we should be able to go ahead and launch it and at least get something up on the screen. So what I recommend is that you bring up a separate prompt just to run your Rails server. So you got to navigate to your folder. And get it launched. All right, and believe it or not, because this link is set up the way it is, it should actually be able to trigger your local application. So if you want to click it right in the book, that's fine. Remember, sometimes that first launch, when the web server first starts, is kind of slow. All right, so this is our new user form. And basically we generated a controller that ties to the model for users and the table for users. Those are all linked together. And then this allows us to do those basic operations related to the fields in that table. So basically this form is going to allow us to create a user. And I'm not sure at this point if the book is having us actually do that. Okay. And that, you know, it says when you actually try to create a user, you should receive an error message. So if you guys want to try that, let's see if we can simulate it. All right, and that's what you should get. That's expected. And part of that is because we don't have some of the other components created yet. So that's normal. All right, so then what we need to do is we need to modify that one section at the bottom of that file, the user's controller RB file that we commented out before. And that's this line down here. So I'm going to get rid of this. And uncomment that. And then let's just make sure that that code matches what we have here. And it looks fine. Save your work. And let's get on to the next page. All right, next thing we're going to do is go back to the routes file. You should still have that open. And all right, so here's one that we're going to add. And notice that this one is a little different than the other two. And notice where they're placing it. They're basically taking the articles one and they're forming it into essentially what is a do-while loop. And that's why there's a do there. So in other words, articles might have multiple comments, so it's going to do that over and over again depending on the number of articles and the number of comments. So save that. All right. Now what we're going to do is we're actually going to generate a controller for comments just like we did for users. So bring up your prompt that is not running the server. And just like we did with users, what this is going to do is it's going to build out an interface basically and a file that allows that interface to have stuff to do based upon the table comments, which is the model for comments, and then it'll look at basic CRUD operations related to it and pre-generate some of those things for us, and at the very least create a file where we can put those things. So issue the command, let it do its work. And that was successful. Okay. The other thing we want to do now is open that file that was just generated, and that's in the controllers folder. You go back to the root, app, controllers, and comments. Alright, what we're going to do here is we're going to grab this code. See what he's got here at GitHub. And you guys notice here on GitHub how some people are having errors. That's why sometimes I'm a little reluctant to grab it from GitHub. So I'm gonna play it safe and just grab it from the book because that's the version that we've been using. But feel free, experiment. The worst thing that's going to happen is you have to do it over again. Not what you want to hear the last week of school, right? And I'm going to do a little side by side here, and as I side by side it, I'm going to kind of add all the spacing. And if you guys notice that I'm missing or there's something different from the code I'm copying from, please let me know. So far to me it all looks the same. You can see here we have a couple of private methods available only to this class file. And let's just make sure that those now I do notice some differences here, and I want you to kind of be aware of it. Notice, for example, where it says notice, how GitHub's got the little equal greater than sign, and we only have a colon. So that is a difference. I'm going to go with what's in the book for right now, but if something fails, that's one spot where I might come and look. All right, next thing we're going to do is we're going to come to the Views Articles Show page. So let's do that. Views Articles Show. We're going to make some edits. And in this case, they want it to look like this. Now, this looks pretty significantly different to me. So I guess I have a little bit of a concern as to why it's so different. So let's see if they have a little clue here. Okay, so this is one of those spots where I'm actually going to refer to GitHub, and then I'm also going to look at the source code that comes with the book. And sure enough, I mean, it seems like that's all there is to it, so I guess let's go ahead and copy it. And I'm trying to tread very cautiously here as I'm changing all this code. Control S to save. Now we're going to switch up to the layout folder. So we're going to go back up to app. No, I'm sorry, views, and then layouts. And now we're going to be looking at the application file, so open that one. And you can see we have the beginning part of our HTML document here. And it does look a little bit different than what we have. So, I mean, this is enough of a difference where we need to actually kind of take a real quick look and just make sure we're not off the mark. I mean, clearly there's some differences here. They're not asking us to change this stuff, and my inclination is that because we've auto-generated this stuff, that we shouldn't mess with it. We shouldn't try to make it like the book. We should leave it as it is because we're working with a different version of Rails. But we will want to add these two lines. But all these little spots where we're not changing things or changing things, we kind of have to keep those kind of in the back of our heads. When we run into a problem and it points to one of those files, it should trigger something in your head like, aha, we should have done that or we shouldn't have done that. All right, and these are going to be placed before the yield. And once again, save your work. Now, the little things that we're working with right now, whenever you see these little underlined file names, those are what we call partials, and partials are pieces of pages that we can use to stitch together other pages. So let's go locate this. So views, articles, and then underscore article ERB. Now you notice that that actually doesn't exist here, so we're going to actually need to create that. So let's do that. I'm just going to copy the file name from here so I don't have to type it. Create new, save as. And then we're going to grab all this code. Let's grab this from GitHub and see what it looks like. That looks the same, so I'm grabbing it from here. Save it. We're going to do the same thing for comments. Creating a new file. Once again, save as. Mindful of where you're saving it, I almost put it in the wrong spot. It's got to be in the comments folder under views. So again, let's take a look at GitHub and see how this compares. Looks good, so let's just grab it from here. Alright, next one is going to be, once again, same folder, but we're doing a new ERB, and you know that there's nothing in there, so we're creating it from scratch, obviously. This code looks fine too. Save your work. All right, now we're going to jump over to the comment HTML ERB file that's in this folder, the one that we just created, and we're going to be adjusting this particular entry, which apparently is already there. So that kind of saves us a little bit of typing, so that's good. Let's go see what happens now. So we have the application is updated. Hopefully your server is still running. If it's not running, then you're going to want to make it run. Alright, so we're just about to hit this page here, and our voice from cyberspace was telling me which URL do we go to. Do we just go to this one? That may or may not work for you, but what you do want to do is just read the instructions here. They just want you to go to the application, which is hopefully up and running. I'm trying to find the browser where it's running, and it's got to be this one. And I'm going to go back. And what I'm going to do is just get the application to launch. So I just went to the root, localhost 3000, and then I'm going to click on one of the articles. Okay, and I'm getting an error. And you can see the URL here, right? And let's go back to the book and just see. So apparently we need to be able to see this. Now, I don't know how many of you are being successful, but clearly I'm not. So what we need to do is look at this particular file. It tells you what file is the culprit. So let's go to article HTML ERB.
Yeah, this is the file that was giving me troubleshooting about getting you all the hosts.
All right.
It's not even letting me go to local hosts.
Okay. So it's giving us very explicit directions here. So notice what it says. The div_for method has been removed from Rails. So here we are copying old instructions, right? And it's telling us, you know, you're using an old code with a new version. All right. Well, it says right there, to continue using it, add the record tag helper to your gem file. If you,
know where to type that exactly.
well, you guys know where your gem file is. I guess that's a pertinent question.
Maybe. I think so.
All right, your gem
It's
file,
in the root of your blog, right?
it's in the root, and it doesn't have a file extension. It's the one that's
I
just
wasn't
called
sure
gem
which-
file.
Also, I wasn't sure if it was gem file log or gem file.
Yep. You just want the regular gem file,
Okay.
and it tells us here. Record tag helper, and the way that you do that is you type this command. So I'm going to copy that, and then I'm going to find a spot in here to paste it. Now the other thing I'm doing is I'm also kind of looking through the stuff that's already here. And frankly, it doesn't really matter where you place it. I'm just going to create a little space here and just drop that in. And then we're going to save. Now, here's the trick though. Since we're doing this, we also need to make sure that everything is going to work. It might just work just by adding this, but chances are it won't. We'll probably have to do the bundle install to make it work. So I'm going to go to my regular prompt, not the server prompt. And notice I'm not killing the server at this point. I'm going to let it run, and then as a last resort, I'll restart it. So at the regular prompt, do bundle install. Okay, and you can see right here, all of these should say using at this point because nothing has really been changed. And then it's right there, it says installing record tag helper 1.0, and it succeeded. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to the browser.
Do we have to do it migrating?
No, this doesn't affect, that's a good question. I was asked, do we have to do a rake db migrate? And the answer to that is no, because we're not changing anything with the data, the model, or the database. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to actually click the back button here. Probably not a bad idea to refresh a couple times, and then just click one of these articles and then see what happens.
I still can't get to local.
Okay, so I'm still getting the error. All right, so what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to pause the video and see if we can figure out the issue.
Just one.
All right, my students are teaching me at this point. They're telling me maybe we should restart the server, so that's fine. I'm going to go to my prompt that's running the server, hit Control-C, Y for yes, and then up arrow twice, restart it. It shouldn't really be necessary, hey, but you never know. And mine worked too. Okay, so we at least have it running. Okay, so that's another valuable lesson right there. Changed the gem file, updated stuff. We ran bundle install. Apparently we need to stop and start the server for it to actually work. So hopefully that's our fix there. All right, I guess the next thing that it wants us to do here is to actually try adding some comments. So why don't we do that and see if it works? I know some people here in class are having an issue. All right, mine happened to work, and I'm hoping yours did too. So I'm going to pause here once again. Let's see if everybody's did work. So the last, I don't know, 20 minutes, a half hour here in class, we basically retraced all the steps that we just went through in the chapter, checking each file line by line to make sure everybody was on the same page. And there were a few differences that we corrected. And then we got to this file here, which is views. Well, actually, this is in the models folder. I apologize. And then we had at one point an issue where I put in this comment in one of my earlier recordings saying that we might need to make some adjustments here. And what I've discovered in the past is that if you drop this line in right here, what happens is it tries to pull up a user provided that you have a user already created. But if for some reason you deleted your users or there's a problem with your user table, it could fail right there. So one thing that you can do is you can actually pull this out and just have it as a comment momentarily. But one of the other students here in class pointed out that this line here was split, like this was down here, and it wasn't part of the same line. It was reading as two separate line numbers, and that was enough to break their application. So this is a file to check. And I know that if you look at my archive videos, that I did a separate video, and it was once again it was in this file. And it was all based on that on this particular model. So something in the copy paste was broken or whatever. But check this file. Please note the folder structure. So we're in app models comment RB. Make sure that this is one complete line, and then you may or may not need to either remove this temporarily or comment it out. Mine worked as is, so, and I think part of that's going to be dependent on whether or not you have a user already created. So once again, I'm going to pause here, and I just want to make sure everybody's working, and then we're going to kick back in. All right, so we successfully, by just reviewing all the files very carefully, we're able to fix all the problems. But I do want to reiterate again that this file here in the models folder needs to look like this, and that you might need to remove this statement from here, and this line might be broken somewhere, so just check those. But since we're all able to now see an article and then place a comment on it, we consider this portion successful. All right, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to create a sessions controller. So we got another new command to type. Let's go ahead and do that. All right, seems to have worked just fine. And then we're going to open up our routes file again, which you should already have open. And then at the bottom, we're going to add a resource called session. Save your work. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to add some stuff to the routes file again, but I want you to pay very close attention here. And I remember this from last year, running into this, right? They just had us add this part, correct? And now they're having us add these two lines. But hold on a sec. Where did this come from? Okay, add all of that. So from the comma on down, if you can grab it that way. I guess I have to do it in pieces here. Doesn't want to give me just the comma. And then we'll add the two gets. And what this is doing is this is setting up session handling for us. So in other words, it is going to be a mechanism that will allow us to keep track of whether a user is logged in or out. Pretty simple conceptually. And now, since we already generated our session controller, we're going to be going to a new folder here. And we're going to go to Controllers Session Controller. And you can see that's empty. And then we're going to add all of this stuff here. And you know, I'm actually going to jump to GitHub. And I just want to do a comparison again. Because I had this sneaking suspicion. Well, actually, it's all the same. Alright. So I'm just going to grab it from here since the formatting is nice. Yeah, and this one's pretty easy to figure out what it's doing. It's just checking to see if the user is authenticating correctly. If it is, then it sets a session and makes it active. Otherwise, it throws an error message and has you basically start again. Alright, now we're going to go to the Views Session folder. So we're going to go up a level, into Views, into Sessions, and we're going to start creating some new files here too. So we're going to create a new HTML ERB. This is the same pattern that we've been using. Do a save as. Paste that file name in there. Just be very, very mindful that you're in that correct folder. So app, views, session, and then the file. And once you've got that going, copy this code. Well, apparently that didn't copy too well. Let's try that again. Says it was copying with formatting. It didn't quite seem to work, but I'm just going to leave it as is. Double checking syntax. And while you guys are doing the same, I guess I'll do the indenting. Save your work. Okay, moving on. Alright, so now we're going back to App Controller Session Controller. That should still be open. And at the very bottom, we're going to add a destroy method. And so conceptually what's happening here while you guys are getting this code in place, when somebody logs in, we actually instantiate a session. That's what the controller is helping us do. And it exists as long as the user is logged in, and when they log out, we run the destroy, which basically kills that instance of the session object that was created. All right, so the thing that we're going to do now, it says we're going to go to our browser, we're going to create a user by going to this link, and then we're going to visit this link to log in, and then we're going to log out. So you got that? 3 separate things we're going to be doing. All right, so let's go create a new user, and I have to come up with a unique name here. All right, so let's get username and password created. So let's create the user. All right, and you can see we got the successful notice here. One thing I'm noticing is that we are getting 2 messages that say user successfully added. So somewhere we have some redundant code, and if you really want, you can track it down and figure out where the redundancy is coming from. But now go back to your book, and it's going to give you a link to log in. So you should log in with that username. And with any luck, it works. And then we're going to click on the logout link. And notice the logout link just logs us out. So the fact that this worked, this is a big success. You know, if I were to do some tweaking, I would go figure out why I'm getting 2 redundant notices. So I've got 2 pages that are interacting. There's probably a partial or something in one of my pages that's doing the same. And I don't know if you remember where we had on a page way early on where we had a little notice thing that came up. That's, you know, you could delete one or the other. I mean, technically you don't even need to have it, but it's just kind of nice to know that something's working or not. Folks, we made it as far as we could make it tonight in Chapter 8. I did have some students work ahead and they managed to complete the rest of it. Apparently that area right around page 160 or so is a little problematic, but once you get past that, it seems to go pretty smooth. Watch the rest of the pre-recorded videos for Chapter 8 because I won't be adding any new ones to help you finish off the work.